Happy New Year to you all. Yeah, it's great to see you here today. So, I'm a professor at Sheffield Hallam University and I'm director of the Centre for Loneliness Studies and the Campaign to End Loneliness. And we run a series of these webinars within the Tackling Loneliness Hub, which are based on translating research into practice. So, we've got two really great speakers for you today to talk about how we co-produce solutions to perinatal loneliness. We've got Ruth Norton Doe, who's at the University of York, and Amy Childley, who is a lived experience facilitator who works with Ruth. So I'm going to hand over to them and they'll run the presentation. If you've got any questions as the presentation's ongoing, please put them in the chat and we'll return to them at the end of the presentation. But also you'll have an opportunity to ask questions directly at the end as well if you want to. So Ruth, I'll pass over to you and Amy now.
Hi everyone. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for this opportunity. Amy and I are really pleased to be here and really enjoyed actually putting this together, didn't we, Amy?
Yeah.
We were trying to, I'm just going to share my screen. We'll see that now. I've lost you. Oh.
I can see it.
You can see the screen, right? Okay. Now I want to see people. Yeah, that's cool. So everyone can see it. That's fab. Yeah, we really enjoyed actually the space to reflect on what we do. So our talk today will be on translating evidence into practice and how we work together to sort of co-produce solutions to perinatal loneliness. And this project is starting to have an impact and is on a pathway to having real world impact, and we work in a very applied way, and that was always the aim from the start, to do a high impact project. And the reason that we think that it has been successful is because of the level of partnership working and co-production which has been throughout the whole process. So yeah, that's the main focus on today, just to basically tell you the story of our journey and how we have gone about that and what's worked and what will happen in the future. So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Andrea. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of York, and Amy Chidley is a lived experience facilitator, but also, as she will talk about a little bit about as well, is also now on her own sort of journey into research and is a fellow of the Stepping Into Research programme through the Mental Health Social Care Incubator. So she's gone on her own journey as well as part of this project, which is really great. So we are going to... So Amy's actually going to start with opening about where we got to in our discussions actually about what guides our project, what we thought is like why it's worked well. So yeah, over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, just to say it's been a real privilege to work with Ruth from the beginning, which has been quite a few years now, and it was great when we were asked to do this. It was funny because when we got together to talk about what we should put in the slides, I said to Ruth, well, I think there's something that really strikes me about the way that you go about your work, and I sort of asked myself, why has Ruth's work been so impactful so far, and how it has actually really kind of taken off. I really thought, well, actually, it's because of the values, it's the approach that Ruth's taken, which has kind of affected everyone else who's worked with her. And so I said, well, actually, it's the values that drives it, rather than it being a sort of academic exercise. So I said, I think it would be nice to say that at the beginning. And so we sort of put together this slide to say really that the aim has been to really engage with people in an authentic way. And the fact that Ruth asked me, as the person with lived experience, to start the presentation kind of speaks to that in a way. It's a real authentic approach, because we really want to make a real world impact on individuals and communities to tackle the real world issues. And in this case, that's the issue of loneliness, specifically in the perinatal period. So as I say, it really starts from real lived experience. So both Ruth and I have our own experience of perinatal mental challenges and feeling lonely in that period. So it's not just, oh, I'm interested in a subject out there. It's something that's really driven from our own experience and the people that we've met as well. And so the research, there's a real commitment to making an impact on what it, on what we want to do. And also, I was really reflecting here, we've put the approach to the research aligns with the purpose of the research, actually by engaging with people all the way through who are people who have or are experiencing loneliness. We're kind of tackling the problem even during the process of it. So that approach, the purpose of the research to tackle loneliness is being aligned in how we're going about it, which feels really kind of authentic. Then this other point about social justice, again, it's about being real. That people have real needs, and there are inequalities that we see in our society, and so by engaging with people, hoping to sort of address those issues too. And then there's this term epistemic justice, which some people may be aware of or not, but really that means that everybody's knowledge is equal. So whether you're a professor or whether you're somebody who's experiencing loneliness yourself, a member of the public, your knowledge and our knowledge and the man next door's knowledge is all really valuable, because we've all got something we can add to the discussion. So those sort of hierarchies are hopefully flattened in this kind of work. And again, it's based in communities, and by doing that work, you're actually building the communities as well. And then again, that's a sort of the point about equal partnerships. Everyone's valued. Of course, you don't always get it absolutely right, but the point is that we're trying all the time to engage people on an equal level. Not saying that everybody's got the same things to bring, but that everyone's valued in an equal way. So I sort of wanted to finish to say that authenticity is built from the beginning with the relationships, and because you're building those relationships as you go along, then during the research and then after the research, it's not like, oh, we've got some research now, how on earth do we make this happen in the real world? You've already built those relationships, and hopefully you're already doing the impact before you're even questioning how are we going to get this to happen in the real world. So that's what I felt when I was talking to Ruth was important to say, this is why I think your approach has been so valuable, and this is why it is actually making an impact. So I'll pass over to Ruth, and she can take you a bit further on the journey.
Oh, thanks so much, Amy. And it was so valuable to have that chat that we had and nail this down. And we're going to think more about this, I think, in future, and do some reading about values-based approaches to research, which I'm sure there's tons out there about that. Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest lesson that I've learned from this. Was my sort of fellowship that I did, that was like 18 months. And since then, I've learned so much from this project. And I'm really aware that impact work starts from day one. And it's all about those building the partnerships and bringing people on board from day one. So you're not just doing it as an add-on at the end. So moving on to sort of what we'll talk about next. I'm going to talk about the Perinatal Loneliness Project and the background and aims, and then talk about the co-production journey that started, as I was writing the application, and before that. Won't spend too long on about the project, although we will show you our video that we made, and then talk very briefly about the key findings and where you can find out even more if you're interested in that. And then discuss our process of dissemination and creating and sharing useful outputs, sort of share some of the impacts we've had so far and the plans in the future. So all of the images that you see in the presentation were co-designed with all the partners and the Lived Experience Advisory Group in the project. So everything, and I think that has been really helpful as well. Going forward. So about the project. So perinatal loneliness is something that I'll talk more about soon, but I had lived experience of perinatal loneliness, having previously researched loneliness with Andrea, and then found myself mostly with amongst older people. And then when I had my daughter, I was like, okay, this is a really big thing for new parents as well. We know that sort of a lack of social support, loneliness, and perinatal mental illness are linked. And perinatal mental illness costs £8.2 billion per year, or £74,000 per case annually, mostly due to sort of lasting impacts on children and sort of service use and social care use. So there's perinatal mental illness is also the biggest cause of children's social care assessments. So parents that are struggling and need some support from social care. So there's a huge sort of agenda of the government. They're really interested in tackling perinatal mental illness. There's been quite a lot of investment recently, and preventing perinatal mental illness from happening is a really good strategy to do that. And given the links with loneliness and social support, my fellowship was basically posing the fact that if we can prevent loneliness and address loneliness, that will also be addressing perinatal mental illness. And we knew that loneliness and perinatal mental illness are linked. We know it's a problem, but we didn't really know much about effective solutions and support and what that might look like. So that's why my research was funded. So I just want to have a quick chat about research impact and what that is, because I certainly don't think I understood it at the beginning of my fellowship. I always thought, in terms of, as an academic that's just gone through, I was like, research impact is about creating the research papers, going to conferences and creating like outputs like guides and toolkits and things that will be picked up by people. And someone explains, my research impact manager explained to me, actually, no, it's about the change that you make. And that's what we're interested in. And that was I was like, okay, I sort of got it, but it was, actually, how are we going to make this real world impact? What are we going to do after we've done those outputs? And that really helped me get my head around it. So it's a demonstrable effect or change beyond academia. And that can be very different depending on what your project is. And what career level you are at and everything. I wanted to prioritize impact through the project, and I chose some sort of realistic. So I think you have to be very realistic about what you can do. Like, I want to like change society and improve everything for everyone. But if you're not realistic and you don't set some targets, then it can be really hard. So we wanted increased awareness of perinatal loneliness and what that actually is. So loneliness between during pregnancy and up to 2 years postnatal is the period that covers, and the different types of loneliness that exist: emotional, social, and existential, which we'll get onto. And also awareness of it as a public health issue. We wanted to start to reduce loneliness experienced by parents. We wanted to start to influence changes to services and healthcare professionals' practice. Influencing policy felt like a lofty goal at the beginning, but we are slowly creeping there now after a long journey, but that was sort of at the beginning. Producing lots of engaging outputs and disseminating them, and also building an online profile to share the work. So that's sort of our goals. So the research that we did was it was in Sheffield and Manchester that we did the field work. We interviewed 15 parents longitudinally, 15 parents that felt lonely in the perinatal period at 2 time points. So during pregnancy and up to 6 months after birth, and then 4 or 5 months later, chatted to them again and talked about their experiences and what services they'd used. We also mapped the 2 cities for what services were out there and what sort of gaps existed, and then used those sort of maps to then speak to services about what they thought the issues were and how we could implement more services, or what they needed, or why parents weren't accessing support. And we tried to be really diverse as well, and all of this research was guided by 2 advisory groups, which I'll talk more about later. It was also guided by a literature review that we did, and there was lots of public engagement. So and I had lots of partners. So there was quite a lot of people that took part in terms of participants, but also a huge number of partners as well. So yeah, the co-production journey then, and my project was around like co-producing solutions. It was always, I always see myself as like I do have my own lived experience and research knowledge, but I see myself as like a facilitator of other people's knowledge, because there are people out there that know absolutely tons, like loads more than me, people that are working on the ground. And it's all just about capturing all of their amazing knowledge, experience, and brains, and just bringing it all together. And that's sort of what I see as my role. So yeah, building partnerships from the beginning. So going back to this previous slide, like Dad Matters, Maternal Mental Health Alliance, Proud to be Parents, NCT, all of these organisations were involved as paid partners from the beginning. And I think it's really important to pay these organisations as well. So much is expected of voluntary sector organisations, and they're expected to do this for free, but actually you need to pay them. They don't even ask for that much. They want compensation for their time. Yeah, I embedded my own lived experience and others. And then as the project continued, I got more and more people involved. It was like a snowball. It just kept growing and growing, and the partners are so vast now. And also really important to go where the energy is. So I knew I wanted to look at LGBTQ plus parents' experiences of loneliness, but it became a really big part of my project just because there was so many organisations that wanted to join that journey. So it ended up being even bigger than I thought it would, that sort of voice. So it's just about, yeah, prioritising the energy. Yeah, so I've mentioned a little bit about my own lived experience, and I think that's really important. Yeah, I had a really bad time in the postnatal period. This is a quote from a magazine that I did. I'm quite open about it, and did an interview for a magazine. And I genuinely just thought, yeah, there was like nothing really there at the end of that journey. And so, yeah, I think that I bring all of, and then obviously I joined this amazing like walking group. Oh, I'm wearing the same fleeces in that picture. That's good synchronicity. Yeah, and through that, I had my research idea, and I'm really open about the fact that that is what I'm bringing to this project as well. It's not like I hide that I have this lived experience, and I could talk for a whole hour about the complexities, the advantages and challenges of that. But everyone has their own experiences, and I think it's really important we're open about them in our research. So that's one sort of pillar. And then another part of the co-production. So yeah, that there were like 4 aspects to the co-production. There was like my own lived experience, and then there was the lived experience advisory group, and then there was the partners. And Amy's gonna talk now about the lived experience advisory group. Yeah.
Thanks, Ruth. Yeah, so as you see from that lovely graphic with the sort of river flowing, there were all these different partners involved. So I came along a little bit later when Ruth set up the lived experience advisory group, or league, if you want to call it. So I just wanted to talk about how effective that was, and how that might have differed perhaps from other research that I've been involved with. So I also have lived experience of perinatal mental illness, and had been for several years involved in various different lived experience groups within trusts or volunteering and so on, and really just a sort of person who keeps my eye open to involved in lots of different opportunities. And I came across Ruth's advert through the McPin Foundation, which you can sign up to get involved with research. And I thought, well, that looks really interesting, perinatal loneliness. And from the beginning, what was really good was Ruth's sort of advert, if you like, the poster call was really clear about what was your involvement would be like. So over how much time, the nature of the involvement, it looked like, oh, actually she's going to be supporting the people as well. You're not just going to be coming along and talking and then off you go. That was clear, and also clear about the reimbursement, because like Ruth just said as well, it's really important that people who are involved are reimbursed, not just for their time, but for their expertise and their insight, so that's really valued. And I just add to that as well, that when we were involved, Ruth would always kind of say, well, if you want to do a bit of extra, that, you know, after meetings and so on, there is extra funding for that. So it wasn't limited to just being in that meeting. It felt, you know, that you were really part of the work. And then turning up to the group, discovered again, because Ruth's done so much sort of community work, that she'd managed to gather a group of really diverse people. A lot of perinatal work, it's hard to get dads involved, but there were at least 3 dads in the group. Myself, I've got physical disability. We had different people from different ethnic backgrounds, and as Ruth mentioned, LGBTQ. And so it just felt like actually it's really representative of lots of different people. And then, as I say, it was lovely to work with someone like Ruth, who made us feel that it was a really safe space to be in, and that she understood, because she's had her own experience. Like she said, she's quite honest about that. She was very organised and things, which really helps too. And this point was really clear to me as well from the beginning. From the beginning of the meetings, it was clear that Ruth hadn't sort of said, right, I've got this project, this is what I've done, what do you think? It was very much, we're doing this together. I haven't even come up with a name for the research project yet. That will happen as we talk. So there was no, no set agenda. And again, that was really refreshing, rather than think, well, they've done the work already and they just want us to kind of tick the box of being there. This sort of really respect and trust, and I've said that word, epistemic justice, that everyone's information, everyone's knowledge has an equal value. And so for me, as with some other projects, coming along to that felt a bit like addressing my own loneliness, my own concerns and things, like a second therapy. So actually being involved was beneficial for me, as well as me hopefully being beneficial to the project. And I love this phrase, a safe and brave space. We often talk about a safe space, but actually when it's really safe, it becomes a brave space. You can actually talk courageously about some things that perhaps you may not even talk to your closest loved ones about, because you're meeting with people who you are identifying with, and you say, yeah, actually I went through a very similar thing myself, and not feeling lonely in that, and building those lovely connections, and even, if you like, professional connections, because you're meeting with other people who are perhaps doing other research, and you're joining in their journeys together. So there's a real sense of being empowered, whereas often when you're a patient or a lonely parent, or in your own experiences, you can feel quite helpless. And actually having that opportunity to meet with other people to support yourself, but to actually feel, I'm making a difference here. The input that I'm giving here is going to make an impact for other people coming after me. So all those things together made for a really good space, and to feel like the people are supported, and that actually this is going to make effective work. So some good tips there for anyone who's setting up any groups. Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks, Amy. And yeah, I mean, I just was thinking whilst you were chatting, Amy, it's so interesting, because I think if you do allow space, like you have extra budget, for example, for people to send emails afterwards, or thoughts, or spend extra time after the meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, I got just like so much valuable stuff came through into my inbox. Like that, some of the most useful stuff actually came in the reflections after.
Yeah.
And also having the budget to be able to give opportunities, like Amy, you presented the research at a conference that I couldn't make. And there are often people with lived experience in these sort of advisory groups that we set up, are put into that box of, oh, that's what they're bringing, their lived experience. But actually they can do so much. Like they have so many skills, often have different jobs or backgrounds as well, and can contribute tons to the research. And like now I see it as like, yeah, some people do just want to turn up and share their lived experience, which is amazing and great. But if people want to do more, then it's great to have that space to do it. And in creating a brave space as well, they will, like, it's some really hard conversations, like, but the best ideas as well, if you're really willing to listen, and people feel safe to like critique your work and suggest different directions. If you're creating that, then that's the best. So that's good. So the other, so as well as the lived experience advisory group, we had a professionals advisory group, which had like 18 different professionals, midwives, health visitors, like children's practitioners, PhD students, it was quite different. And we had the groups at different times because parents, yeah, it was very different energies and also different availability. So we had all of our parents groups in evenings after bedtime, which showed the commitment. Like, people coming at 8 o'clock at night for an hour and a half meeting is like, it's tough. Like, I had a 2-year-old at the time as well. It was tough, like, for everyone, I think, but we all also got a lot out of it. And then in addition to that, we had all these partners. So I've just listed them all here, but that's everyone that's been involved in this project. And there's a huge amount of energy and time gone in to that. Yeah, and everyone here like commented on all the versions of stuff and helped share it as well. And in addition to that, I use like extra money from like ESRC Festival of Social Science to do like one-off events to get community feedback as well. You see like this little, we set up like a stay and play, and parents did like mini zines and posted ideas into this post box to get feedback about, yeah, what we could do in Sheffield to reduce loneliness. So there's lots of different things that went into the co-production and the work. So yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about the findings. I am just going to show the video, I think it speaks for itself. But this is a report, Solutions for Perinatal Loneliness, which was definitely the product of everyone that I've named so far and all the organisations, a real joint effort. People commented on versions. It went on for a long time, that process. But yeah, we realise that parents do feel these 3 different types of loneliness: emotional loneliness, social loneliness, and existential loneliness. Not having emotional loneliness, like not having as many people as you like to share your close feelings to; social loneliness, not having as many social contacts with other people as you'd like, or opportunities to see other people; and existential loneliness, feeling invisible, excluded, different to others, not feeling like yourself, lacking your identity. And what we did is we created like a video which sort of summarized all of the findings. So these the following clips that you're about to see, and this whole video was created by an illustrator, but we had lots of versions on the script and everything like that. We pulled it all together. But yeah, these stories aren't any actual reflecting real people, but I think everyone that took part in the research's journeys are represented by these stories. I will now hopefully press, just a trigger warning for people. Like, there is the mention of perinatal loss in this, so the video lasts about 6-7 minutes. So if you didn't want to watch that, you can not. Yeah, you can rejoin in 7 minutes. I'll
After a rough night seeing each hour, I wanted to go out, but it was a struggle getting the pram down the stairs of our flat because the lift was broken. The first bus didn't turn up, and the next one had no spaces for prams. We were late to the playgroup, and everyone was already talking in groups, and I felt so awkward. I walked home alone to save money, but it rained, and there was nowhere to dry the pram in my flat, which is already damp, and I can't afford the heating.
All the baby groups are during the day when I am at work. The dad's groups are all like football and curry, which actually isn't what I like. Or they're called Mummy and Me Swimming, and if you do go, you get, now mummies do this or mummies do that. When I'm out with my kids, people say, "Oh, are you babysitting?" Actually, dads don't babysit, they just dad. So when the baby is screaming, I worry that people question what I'm doing, so I actually carry proof she is mine just in case. It puts me off going out.
There wasn't a local LGBTQ+ antenatal group, so being a lesbian couple, it felt really weird. We got split off into groups of mums and dads, and I kind of wanted the world to swallow me up when I had to join the dads group. During the pregnancy, the midwife spoke to my wife and not me, even though I'm his mum too. Sometimes they thought I was a friend and they kept asking about Dad. I felt like a spare part.
Our first daughter was stillborn. Nobody asked me how I was coping. They only ever asked me how my wife was doing. I put on a brave face, and I felt like I had to be strong for everyone. When I was growing up, I was told men don't cry. Thankfully, now I've learnt that they do. I've got 2 more kids now, and I just wish people recognised that we dads have feelings too, and we aren't just the support crew.
I went to a baby class to meet people, but I just felt like I didn't fit in. All of the activities were for the baby, and mine just wanted to be fed and screened for most of it. It cost so much money, like £9.50, and I didn't even get to have one adult conversation.
I had my baby young and all my friends were still out partying and I felt so left out. No one understood what having a baby was like, and my phone went quiet. When I went to baby groups, I felt like all the other mums had their lives together, careers, houses, husbands, and they were all looking down on me. It might not even have been true, but you start to think like that, especially everything that they said about how we teenage mothers are such a problem.
We don't really talk about mental illness in my community. Children are a gift from God and we should be grateful. Oh, I am, But also, where is the village I was promised? No one back home realizes what it's like having a baby in the UK. People do come round, but they just want to hold a baby, and I end up running around after them too. I'm exhausted, and the only time I get to myself is in the shower, sometimes.
I remember telling my friend one day that I hated my baby and I regretted having her. And they said nothing. They just looked really awkward and then they stopped coming round. I felt so alone. No one wants to hear about it when you were finding everything so hard.
I look out of the window and just wait for them to get home. I used to have a full calendar with work, friends and hobbies, and now it's just home alone, clock watching, survival, and feeling like a terrible failure. I had no idea that some babies just don't sleep or that breastfeeding could be so hard or so painful. I always thought I would be a great mother, but I'm not. I'm scared to tell people how I really feel in case they take my baby away.
I think there's a bit more to that, but I can't.
After a rough night,
Maybe it finished. I can't remember. It's been a while since I've seen it. That might be the end. Yeah, I mean, every time I watch that, it does still hit quite hard. But I think there was a lot of work that went into that, and I'm not going to like I say, I could do a whole hour about the findings. But what we were finding is that there were individual causes. Yeah, thanks for all the support, everyone. And it wasn't often loneliness, and this is something I know we talk about a lot on here, but like people think, oh, they feel lonely, what can they do about it? But actually there's so many different things that go into that. There's poverty, there's like lack of buses, there's discrimination, underfunded services, individualistic society, and there's all of these mind maps that we made are in the report. So talking about that, actually, like we decided, I mean, again, I decided, and it felt quite hard, well, not hard for me, but it felt, I could feel academia saying, write papers. You've done a fellowship. It's time to write up your papers. But I still haven't written up these findings as I've written 2 papers, but not about the cultural, individual and structural drivers, which is the main findings of my work. Because I prioritised creating these easy read reports and mind maps that people could pick up. So I prioritised impact. And that, I'm completely with that decision. But academia, as an early career academic, that can feel quite hard because often we get judged in terms of papers and metrics like that. But it was so important to get these findings out there. So there's the Easy Read report has lots of different, all of the solutions like family friendly society, has specific sort of mind maps for fathers and LGBTQ plus parents. So some recommendations were to address these cultural and structural drivers as well as individual drivers through, creating inclusive and accessible services, not to make assumptions about loneliness, routinely screen all parents and ask direct questions about loneliness, to co-produce interventions and services. Often social groups that are out there at the moment can make parents feel even lonelier if they go along and they don't feel included or they don't feel like they fit in. There's going to be a policy brief out soon as well, which is this is a draft on the right at the moment, so it's not finished, but by the end of March there will be a policy brief, which again is going to include like improving screening and identification, because often we had parents say time and time again that the health visitor would maybe come round and see that they had family there, and see that they had a friendship network and assume they weren't lonely. But actually, you can feel really lonely if you can't authentically share how you're feeling with those people. And is the support appropriate? Like, is the support actually, you know, is the relationship that you have with your family making it worse? So there's a lot of, it can kind of be like a very quick appointment and a quick assumption made. We need to invest a lot more in services, which, you know, maybe the time that health visitors have, they don't have enough time to unpack that. We need to improve in parental leave for dads and non-birthing partners, and for single or solo parents as well. We need to improve some sort of support. There needs to be more specialist support for non-birthing parents and LGBTQ plus parents as well. And we need services and activities specifically to address loneliness. So many activities like baby massage or antenatal groups are all about baby, and parents that feel even more feel lonely are going along to these groups. And maybe it's contributing to their feelings of guilt because they're not they're not doing baby massage every day when they get home. They're not doing everything right. They feel like a failure, whereas social groups are what parents said loud and clear they wanted, and social groups of activities they were interested in. Just mindful of the time. We'll probably try and wrap up in the next 10 minutes. So but if you want to read more about any of the findings, then there's that report as well, and more things will come out. So what we thinking about impact in mind, the outputs to share all these findings, we put everything on the perinatal-loneliness.com website, and that was set up from the beginning, and we've used that all the way along to like talk about the journey of research. And we've like won 2 awards now for like open research practice, it's called. So it's about being really open and honest about all of like the research process, and inviting people to comment and critique what you're doing and suggest changes the whole way through. So we've been very open about that. We've put our animations on the videos, and they're also available as individual clips as well, so people can show them like appropriate videos on our YouTube channel. The work, we did a perinatal loneliness conference. We've done 2 now online. We had 150 people, and most of which practitioners, come to that one. And this is like on the bottom right picture there, we had a live scribe as well that came and sort of scribed that. So it was absolutely amazing. And that was the accumulation actually of 150 people signing up, was testament to how much work we'd done throughout the project to create awareness of the work we were doing. We had a perinatal loneliness research group with practitioners and academics who came along. And we set that up, and then at a part of that group we wrote a paper together, which was like what we know about, a consensus statement about what we know about loneliness and what we'd like to know in the future, and then the project report as well. So there was a lot, and the work has actually been used by the funder, the NIHR, as an impact case study now as well. So it's very good for that. We've also got some so after that I got a follow-on grant as well to do more impact work. So it was actually through conversations with Amy about the sort of phase 1 work, which was directly as part of the original funded fellowship. And she was like, well, all this is great, but wouldn't it be nice to have something a bit more like positive, sort of showing you like, giving people some hope about what things could look like if they were different. And it was like an earworm that didn't go away. So that's where I got some funding for phase 2, where we're designing and disseminating booklets for parents about like tips and advice about how to handle loneliness, and also just trying to normalize the experience, because most people were saying like, oh, I didn't know everyone else felt like this too. And actually that's kind of critical. And we never want to like normalize it in terms of make it normal, but just making people feel less alone, that they feel lonely, is a big goal. So we're also designing a more engaging website. Perinatal-loneliness is not really like what parents would look for. So that's like the little picture on that is should be finished soon, but it's called the Lonely Parents Hub instead, which is, again, it's taken how long has it taken Amy to get that name? Like, I don't even know if I've shared that name with you yet, actually, but we have thought about what to call this for a long time, and we won't go into that, but again, that's where all the different voices have helped. So we're also doing a policy brief. How we created the outputs, I think I've talked about this as we've gone along, but definitely, prioritizing different audiences. doing it values based and not always getting it right, and getting a lot of like multiple feedback cycles. Like I asked for feedback on these booklets, so this is on the right, this is the like draft like 6 probably now of this booklet, and I was like really happy to get it, but also like my heart was sinking with everything I got back, because it's really hard to get the feedback. But then once you've taken a little bit of time away from it and you look at it, you're like, oh my God, this is so amazing, this feedback. And that's always the process. It's about that brave thing. People are not afraid to tell me that something's not working. And yeah, like so these drawings was an amazing person who's part of the advisory group that Amy ran, that she'll talk about. And she came up with all these illustrations, and I was like, oh my God, they're amazing. Like, that's exactly what the booklet should look like. We should use these. And so we've given them to the designer then the designer created this. And again, it's like making sure that we're like compensating people fairly for their work as well in those groups. It's something that you've got to do properly. So yeah, how we is this? Yeah, so I'm going to pass you over to Amy now, and I'm not sure we might not have that much time for I think we've talked quite a lot, haven't we? Leave some time for questions, but
no, really quick, really.
No, you can take as much time as you want. Then after that, we might, yeah,
that's fine. No, but absolutely, it was the idea of having something, a booklet and a flyer or a poster. And I think the original poster that had come out was very much, it looked very academic, it looked quite researchy, didn't it? It was kind of, oh, this is what we've done this research, and if you're feeling lonely, you might be interested. And actually the group came back and just said, actually, we just want a picture to say, feeling lonely, look at this kind of thing, something really snappy. So all the kind of detailed information kind of almost went out of the window, didn't it? It was, but yeah, now we've got that with those very great illustrations and the thought bubbles. And I think, some of us had done things before. There was a lovely book that has these thought bubbles of what people say out loud, the how are you? And people say fine. And actually the thought bubble is how they're really feeling. And we kind of wanted to capture that. So I led this workshop, and even though I know that co-production is a great thing to do, again, I was just completely overwhelmed by the amount of brilliant insight. And I think another thing Ruth mentioned earlier about people don't just bring their lived experience, but the skills. So there's one lady in the group who happened to be, in her day job, a website designer. So she's able to say, well, actually, this is what we do when we're trying to reach audiences. These are the tips. And again, the lady who is does drawings, and we had a dad, and he was so helpful at bringing perspective. I think quite often we thought about the dad's at home perspective, but he was bringing the dad going back to work perspective and how lonely that was, and that wasn't something that had sort of come up before. So there was so much that came, and once again, as Ruth said, she'd budgeted for saying, well, actually, not just what happens during the meeting, but afterwards. And then there was so much more input, and people gave so much of their time above and beyond what we'd been budgeted for. But I think that was because that had been honoured, and then they were so keen to be involved. And I'm still kind of emailing people and going, oh, look what's happening next. And they're all very enthusiastic and say, oh, I'd like to be involved in anything that happens. So yeah, I'll go on from to the next one now, but just to give you a bit of picture around that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was so, because when I first designed the booklet, there wasn't a flyer, and people said, oh, actually, like, no one's going to pick up a booklet, like, why don't you have a flyer that it can go everywhere and people follow the QR code to the booklet? And I was like, oh yeah, like, that's a good idea. And also I think you have to work with someone like, say, Caroline at Boy Designs, who is really patient, because she does a lot of edits and amendments, and she's used to working with me now and knows how much things change, and we budget it and cost it properly to allow for like lots of revisions. So as usual, I've taught absolutely tons, and we're not probably going to get to do all of like the impact stuff fully, but I'm just going to give you a really like whistle stop sort of tour of so the impacts that we've had because of designing all these really attractive outputs. The work was picked up by The Guardian, and Lucy Jones, who wrote the book Matrescence, which some of you might be familiar with if you're interested in perinatal stuff, picked it up and wrote an article featuring the research, and it's also been picked up by podcasts. But people have found the work because they've read the mind map report. They would never have picked up an academic paper, so it kind of it was worth it. Like it was, yeah, I mean, it was always going to be worth it. A lot of individuals have contacted me, yeah, saying, like, on the comments on the YouTube channel and things, saying, yeah, it's made a difference, making inroads into policy, and also, yeah, lots of different research spin-outs. So services have said that after reading the mind maps and coming to talks and presentations, that they're, you know, people didn't realise, for example, that if it doesn't say dads welcome or LGBTQ plus parents welcome on the flyer, they might not go. And it's just a really simple change. And a lot of services have started to do that now, just be really clear on the advertising, because they always were welcome, but they might not necessarily have felt safe to go or welcome unless it's said explicitly. We've had, how many now? Like 4 follow-on projects from this as well. And most of these big follow-on projects have co-applicants who were part of the original perinatal loneliness advisory group. So we've got a Muslim mothers walking group follow on with a co-applicant from the original advisory group. Yeah, Amy is a co-applicant on and the Impact Project and this new one, Pearl, which so it's like, again, bringing your team with you. Yeah, the Muslim mothers walking group project and perinatal loneliness, like walking groups, is an impact of the research. We have actually so as I was explaining, parents said they wanted stuff to do that was fun and for them and not the baby. I also love walking groups, so that's my own lived experience too. But we've now set up 3 walking groups that are going really well, and one is embedded in the perinatal service in Sheffield, and yeah, they're working really well. We've done LGBTQ plus zines. So LGBTQ plus parents told us that when they wanted to, there was no visible parents like them. They felt really lonely because there was nothing specifically for them. So we created an online digital zine with just stories of queer love, hope and joy in LGBTQ plus parenting. It's been viewed over 1,500 times. It was, yeah, we held like online and in-person workshops, and people submitted pages like these 2 that you can see here. And it's a really beautiful booklet. Yeah, and as someone said here, yeah, I really appreciate, yeah, they started welling up about the solidarity. It's like the first time that they'd contacted or communicated really with someone that had the same experience as them. And yeah, finally, I feel like we are now starting to make inroads into policy as well. So that's part of my impact grant. I've been working on this MP, Laura Craik-Smith, for quite some time, so contacting her on Twitter and showed her my Easy Read report, again, which policymakers can pick up, and was invited to a round table about the perinatal mental health 10-year plan. And this is, you can see where I'm there at Westminster. And yeah, it was just amazing to be in a room with all these people talking about loneliness and the voluntary sector. So yeah. I think, should we finish there, Amy? And we might, yeah, I think actually we were going to finish on sort of Amy's journey, but yeah, that's there's obviously a lot that's happened, and the impacts are starting to be had, and I feel like I'm on the beginning of the policy impact journey. So that brief that I've written as part of my new impact grant is being shared by the National Children's Bureau, so they're going to take it around with them in their work, and I'm excited about like what could happen to get loneliness picked up as in the future. And then yeah, finally, I just wanted to give Amy some time to talk about her journey as a lived experience collaborator and her future in that.
Yeah, I'll try and whiz through so that there's time for some questions. but basically to say, yeah, so as Ruth and I both said, we've both had our experience of perinatal mental illness, and that's what then kind of got me involved into wanting to make a difference for other people. So that's my sort of timeline. And so I got involved with a local perinatal charity that was just being set up to help as a peer support worker. And then also in the trust where I'd been a patient. And like Ruth saying with her research journey, my sort of lived experience journey snowballed. I ended up working with NHS England, interestingly, around about the time of developing the long-term plan, and had quite an influence on how that came about. So that was really quite exciting too. Involved in the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and my real passion is joining up all the dots between the different organisations, and then so from that point got involved with Ruth's project, and various other projects, and in my local trust, the Perinatal Research Group there, and then really developed this real hunger really to do some of my own research. But again, just to say at the bottom, the reason for doing the research is to make a real difference in people's lives, and I really love to, my vision, if you like, and my son designed this, I did a scribble and he designed this lovely logo, is to see every person experience life to the full. So whether that's a patient, or whether it's a CEO of a company, or your mum or your dad, or somebody you know, is to take what's they might have. Some people just don't realise that they're worth anything, but there's always something in somebody that you can take and help them experience more life, and that's what I wanted to do as I go forward into doing research, is to improve the lives of people with lived experience, because doing this kind of work can take a lot out of you. It's very rewarding, but it's also very challenging. And so what I want to do in my research is to look at those people's experiences and see how organisations can support that better. And so, yeah, my next slide, Ruth, is, it's called boundary spanning. So boundary spanning basically means working across lots of organisations. And if we send out the slides, you can read that if you want to. But basically, it's just saying that I've discovered this importance of working between different organisations and bringing together, and as like Ruth's shown, all those partners getting involved makes such a difference. People aren't working on their own, and people with lived experience can actually bring so much to the table, but I'm really concerned quite often that they're not given the support they need. So that's what I want to do, again, to help people flourish in their lives. I'm on the journey now, and Ruth again has been a great mentor for me and is helping me to kind of get my feet on the right rungs of the ladder in order to lots of hearts there. I think it's great, to get into the right channels to do that, because there are certain channels that are going to make your work more effective than if you just go off and do it by yourself. So I'm very grateful for Ruth, and so my journey's been a result of being involved in all these different projects. I'll stop there so there's time for questions or comments, but thanks, Ruth, for the journey together, and we're keeping going, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, and neither Amy or I are known for our brevity, I don't think so. No. we've gone on quite a long time, but hopefully you found it useful. That was so great, Amy, and it is really exciting to see where Amy's going next, because I think academia and academic jobs, they just don't. They're so close. You have to have like a PhD. But I'm telling you now, Amy could do my job. Like, she doesn't have a PhD yet, but she could, and we should be bringing those people into our institutions, not creating barriers to stop them. So yeah.
Thank you, Ruth and Amy. That's brilliant. We've only got 5 minutes. I just want to say that was just such a fantastic presentation. I just found myself nodding all the time, from because so much of it is in my journey as well, so I think the values approach is really crucial, and also just watching that video, which I thought was great, just excellent. And I think this idea of not making assumptions that because people are within a certain group, they're somehow going to be like other people. It's more about bringing like-minded people together and not labeling them as, older people all want to do this, or mothers all want to do this kind of activity. So those were 2 standout points for me, but it was just fantastic. And thank you so much. We've got one question in the chat, which is from Tina. So she's saying, apart from yours, Ruth, what lived experience went into the research design before you got the main grant? I'm sure you put some emphasis on that by the sounds of it. If you could just maybe summarise that.
Yeah, definitely. Not as much as goes into my future grants, for sure. I think the 3 schools had a month from start to finish. It was a month long. I think they've extended it now. But I did have 3 of the lived experience advisory group members were involved from I was talking to them in that month, and also I'd spent pretty much my entire maternity leave chatting to people, so I felt like I'd talked to a lot of people about it. But in terms of the actual research design and the focus groups and interviews, like not that much. But yeah, in terms of speaking to them what was important and the types of questions I should be asking, a lot. And now it's something that is different for all my future grants for sure. Yeah, it's a lot more involvement.
I was curious because if the funders only give you a month, oh god, that's not good. I mean, it's obvious, that I've been there, done that, but oh dear, they have to learn as well, and it's difficult because it is chicken and egg. And where do you start? And people will criticise you for not having a load of people feeding in and blah blah blah. But you need to have that. But I appreciate it. But the funders should know better.
I mean, I can't remember how old my daughter was. I'd just gone back to work. She was, I think sometimes I reflect, like, what was I doing? It was kind of a crazy decision to do it. I had like my daughter looking after her, writing with one hand while she was napping, and also chatting to other parents that were doing the same about, what do you think about this? And how do we, it was a crazy time driven by passion.
Can I just add to that as well in terms of the time before the grant, of course, is that so Ruth's applying for a grant. If she wants to get people involved with lived experience, you can't reimburse them because you haven't been given the grant for the time before as well. So if you want to really, really get that lived experience involvement into putting onto the grant, you've got to rely on people's goodwill, and unless somehow afterwards you can say, well, but the grant providers don't provide grants for the input before the grant is given. So again, the chicken and egg difficult situation.
And that's the thing, you often find good people trying to find money down the back of the sofa.
Yes.
In terms of some money that's left over from another grant or something to honour that. But it's always frustrating that.
It is, and I think also you mentioned quite a few times, Ruth, about the importance of budget and having enough budget for some of these things, and that isn't always available either. So I think, you've done really well there, and sometimes we want, it's about sort of what you can do within the limits of what you're able to do as well, and we can't always live up to exactly what sort of level of co-production we want to do, which again comes back to issues around funding and the where priorities are placed on that. I think I've got time for at least one more question. So from Vicky, who is asking if any of your policy impact work will be or is in the new Healthy Child programme.
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. So part of the reason why I applied for Impact 2, like Perinatal Loneliness 2, is because I kept seeing things like a call for evidence, for example. But because my work has moved on from perinatal loneliness now and I'm fully funded on a different grant, I was like, I don't have time to put the effort and energy into contributing to all these evidence calls and things. So I have submitted to quite a few inquiries, but not as many as I'd have liked. I've missed out on a lot of opportunity. So we'll see what's being picked up on where, but I've tried to influence where I can in the time that I've had, and I'm excited about the future.
Great, thank you. Well, unfortunately we've come to the end and we haven't got time for any more questions, but it's been really brilliant. Really enjoyed listening to you. I'm sure everyone else did by the reaction and responses as well. And I think I should just say to both of you, clearly you've gone on like a great journey together, and individually. In fact, Ruth, since we worked together, which was quite a few years ago now, you're just doing amazing things. So I want to just say thank you, both of you, and well done. And I'm sure there'll be much more impactful work going forward from both of you as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a real privilege to be here.
Thank you. And we will be sending around the slides.